retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert. Thank you for being with us. He's in Washington, D.C. You say the best thing Israel can do right now is to test Hamas. How so?
Well, Marnie, it's certainly the case right here that we are ending the fourth day of the agreed upon pause in fighting. But certainly now we see going forward that Israel does have an objective of destroying Hamas, but they also have an objective of securing the release of all those hostages. And the only way that Israel would have started this pause 4 days ago is if they feel that they have sufficiently isolated and neutralized Hamas such that they can't gain an advantage during this pause. And that's the same reason why an extended pause would be helpful to Israel. And ultimately, they should be the ones initiating the request for the pause and see if Hamas will ultimately follow through.
Hamas is not the only group, however, holding some of these hostages. There are reports Palestinian Islamic Jihad may be holding up to 50 of the hostages. How difficult will it be to free those if it's not clear where they may be?
Marnie, it certainly is the case that releasing or securing the release of hostages is extremely difficult, not just because Hamas is untrustworthy, but because, as you said, there are other groups that are holding hostages, but they are in communication with one another. And if one feels that it is in their best interest to release hostages, then likely the other will as well.
Let's talk about these attacks against U.S. forces. There were 4 on Thanksgiving Day against U.S. troops in Iraq and also Syria. What concerns you most about the frequency of the attacks that we're seeing in the Middle East?
Marnie, clearly our deterrent posture is not working. 73 attacks, 70 Americans injured, 1 American killed. The only way that Iran recognizes that they should stop doing what they're doing is when they see resolve, capability, strength, and will from the United States. And these pinprick attacks that we've been undertaking in response to these attacks against U.S. forces have certainly not been enough to stop the Iranian-supported groups.
The Pentagon says deterrence measures have been successful. We have seen some casualties, though, as you mentioned. What are the options now for the U.S. to respond to Iran and others? Marnie,
Tom Cotton is spot on that we need to start choosing targets that are more consequential to the Iranians. There are Iranian-aligned groups that have forces, like he said, in Iraq and in Syria, but there are also Iranian positions in both of those countries. And thus far, we have been too timid to strike those targets. And ultimately, Iran would get the message if we start escalating ourselves that they need to back off, stop attacking American positions.
Yeah, you say American weakness invites aggression, and we're seeing it play out in the Middle East. What do you make of this latest situation, the American warship in the South China Sea?
Marnie, it continues to be the case that not just what goes on in the Western Pacific affects what goes on in the Western Pacific, but what happens in any part of the world ultimately telegraphs our deterrent posture. And when we are weak and irresolute in one place, then other malign actors like China or Russia or North Korea will test our resolve. And thus far, for the last 3 years, our weakness has invited aggression.
Finally, if the ceasefire is not extended, we will see the fighting resume in the north and potentially in the south. What does the next phase of this ground war look like in Gaza?
Marnie, it continues to be the case that Israel is going to neutralize and isolate Hamas and those other terrorist groups. They know that their stronghold is in northern Gaza, and there's still work to be done there. But there also are some places that need to be considered in the south part of Gaza. And then there's 2.3 million Palestinians that need to be cared for in the right way. And Israel needs to continue to fight against Hamas to destroy them to achieve that objective. But it's also in their best interest to find a way to end the war gracefully by caring for those Palestinians.
And what that looks like, the future for not only the Israelis, but those living in Gaza, to be determined. Brigadier General John Teichert, as always, thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to NewsNationNow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.